the recording. And the recording is running right now. And I'm going to ask Aoife, in fact, to keep an eye on this and tell me if we do start to get staggers, any sort of bandwidth problems. And if you have problems with me freezing, for example, let me know and I'll kill the video. I'll keep it on because it just keeps me present with you and you present with me during this session. Okay, session 3 already. So getting straight into things. Let me start as I always do, and those of you who have been around other programs, I'm just going to say it just one more time. We are capable, we are built biologically to be able to single task. We don't multitask very well. We think we do, but we don't. And so I would say, if you've invested the time and the energy to come along and attend the program, and I would invite you just to think, what is it I wanted to get out of it? And would it be best served by closing off other tabs, putting your phone on silent, closing the door, so that we can be together over the next 90 minutes? I know that you will definitely get the best out of the program if you're here and present and just connected. So by way of closing down some tabs, and by way of getting you into the room, because I know all of you, like me, you've come in from activities elsewhere, and your mind is flying with what you need to do afterwards and what you were doing before and what's going on at home, and it's near the end of the day, or maybe with your day, it's at the beginning of the day, and here's what I have to do. I just want to see if we can get us all sort of present here. So I'm going to share with you a simple practice just for closing some of those tabs and just maybe bring us all present. And it's one that belongs to the Search Inside Yourself Institute, whom I also teach for, and they're very kindly allowing me to use it. It is a fantastic, quick, 1-minute intervention in those situations where you're just feeling under pressure, fraught, and you just need to bring yourself present and ground yourself and figure out what to do. And you know those days when everything just seems to have gone wrong and you just feel, where do I start? This is just such a mess and I don't know where to start. This is a great practice. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through the practice, and then I'm going to invite you to take part in it. It's only 3 breaths. It takes 3 breaths. It takes less than a minute. So let me tell you about the first one. And you can follow the first part, but we're going to do it properly in a moment. So the first part I invite you to do is just take 1 mindful breath. So 1 breath where you just following the breath in, noticing the chest expanding, the abdomen rising, and then follow the breath out. So that's the first breath. On the second breath, I'm going to ask you in a moment to, as you breathe in, just to relax yourself, just to let any tension that's in your body anywhere just fall away. Let your body just soften and relax. And then on the third breath, just to ask yourself, what's important now? Because when you're fraught and when you're under pressure and so on and so forth, there's always one thing that's more important than anything else. And getting started is frequently the key challenge in that situation. So let's do that. So you take 3 breaths, and I won't talk you through it. I'll maybe count you through it with my fingers. We'll take 1 breath, which is a mindful breath, a second one to relax and soften the body, and the third one just what's important now, and then we'll carry on. So let's do that. And with that practice, just letting that what's important now message ring in your mind to identify for you what's really the most important thing right now. Where can I get started? And if that most important thing is to be at this session here, welcome, tune into it. If there's something telling you I really should be somewhere else, well then go to what's important now. Okay, but so welcome to the session. To repeat what I said on week 1 and week 2, we're looking in this program to help salespeople and people who support salespeople, so coaches, consultants, trainers, and managers, to help salespeople build focus and attention, increase connection with people, handle stress, and build resilience. And we've already covered sessions 1 and 2, where we set the scene, and we looked in session 1 at the importance of emotional intelligence and mindfulness in selling. Last week, we started the topic of self-awareness. This week, we're going to carry on with self-awareness and into awareness of others. And next week, we're going to look at resilience. How do you deal with the stress that comes from the quotas and the other pressures that beset us as salespeople? So this week, we're going to meld into awareness of others. But as you'll see, awareness of yourself or self-awareness is such a critical component in becoming aware of others. And I'll show you the science behind that in a few moments, that we're going to do one final piece, one final part of self-awareness. Let me, before we do that, ask you a question. Last week I gave you, and I jokingly referred to it as homework. I said, here are the things to do for next week. And I said, please review your report and see if you can identify even one area where if you showed up differently, it would have an impact. You're capable with the system there, you're able to put your hand up. Do me a favor, put your hand up if you've had a chance to go through the report over the last week and just figure out, what is it that I could do that would be slightly different? And just pop your hands up. Okay, so we're getting a couple of hands going up. Great, super. So what I would encourage you, for those of you who haven't gotten to do it yet, and that's okay, we've all lots of competing priorities. You've put time, energy, and effort into the report. So have the people who fed back in you. We put a little bit of money and time, energy, and effort into it. I would say if nothing changes as a result, it was a waste of your investment. So I would encourage you, it's never too late to dive into that and say, what's the one strong message coming out there of what I could change about the way I show up that would improve the impact I have upon people. The other thing I suggested to you was that you download the Insights Timer, which is a free app on Android and iPhone, and that you practice the attention practice daily. Again, and this is not school teacher talking, I'm just curious, how many people got to give that bit of practice? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, so I'm looking at a handful of people, I think, got to do that. And it's never too late to start, okay? And the final thing I said was, hey, see if you can journal every day, or every second day, I should say, using the provided prompts. And the key message I want to get across here, and I've made it a few times, is while we deal with the academic stuff and we deal with the theory of this stuff during this program, this is, in its essence, a practical program. It's about learning how to be in a different way, learning how to show up in a different way. Most salespeople have been trained to within an inch of their lives. So they know how to do what they do. They understand the process of selling. They understand their products. They understand the features and advantages and benefits. This is not about that. This is about who does your prospect and your client encounter when they meet you, and how do you show up in a way that maximizes the effectiveness of that interaction. So it's less about doing than being, a point that I'll make later on. So really, it's your call always, but if you want to get the most out of this, see if you can tune into doing the practices for the next time around. Now, I'm going to sort of rewind a little bit back to session 1 and session 2 and just touch on some stuff, because I think it's important just to set the scene for what we're going to cover today. And you may remember I referred to this definition, which I really like, from Dan Harris, who's a US news anchor who had a panic attack on front of a couple million people and ended up a great proponent of mindfulness meditation. And what's lovely about this, because it really exemplifies what mindfulness is in a sales context. He said, it's the ability to know what's going on in your head at any given moment without getting carried away with it. And so many times a thought or a worry or a concern or a problem will come into our heads and bang, we're gone. We're no longer here. We're off worrying about what might happen in the future or what happened in the past. And so mindfulness is the ability to be able to know what's going on in your head, to notice what's going on, but not get carried away with it. So let's see, how do we use that definition to move forward into the program? We spoke about the sales environment. Oh my God, there are so many ways that you can get lost in the environment and get lost in your thoughts. Now, the example we used on week 1 was we said, let's look at a sales guy who's doing an informal presentation. It's this chap here. who's holding the iPad or the phone in his hand. And you can see that these two people are engaged. And over here, the man whom we called Mike, with all apologies to all the Mikes out there, the man that we called Mike is just not turned on. Now, I know from that situation, you know if you're a salesperson or you're making a presentation, what happens when somebody tunes out of your presentation, tunes out of the sales call, starts looking out the window, looking at their watch, or looking distracted. It triggers you. It triggers you because, as we saw in the neuroscience in week 1, it's a threat. It's not a threat to your existence, it's not a threat to your life, but it triggers the same ancient circuitry in your brain, that old reptilian brain, into the fight or flight response. And very frequently, salespeople are triggered into either fight responses, where Mike doesn't pay attention, and so without even realizing, they start talking a little bit louder, trying to become a little bit overbearing, maybe defensive or even aggressive, leaning in. Tone can become sharp and short and sharp. And without even realizing, we get caught up in what's going on with Mike. Why is he not listening? And so on and so forth. And we find ourselves trapped into either fight or flight type responses. Now, we're not doing what the man in the first week's video was doing, where we're literally up on our feet running to rescue our kids from a runaway car. But the same mechanism in the brain has hooked us and grabbed us and taken us away from the present moment and taken us away from focus on the client. And we become trapped. So mindfulness is to know that that's going on in your head, but not to get caught up in it. And here's the second problem. There are at least two parties in every sales conversation. Two people who can potentially get overwhelmed by what's going on in their head. You can get overwhelmed as a salesperson by somebody saying, you do know we're talking to 4 other vendors. Or, I have to say your stuff is really expensive. Or, I saw a presentation by Joe Bloggs and company last week. It was fantastic. That triggers you. You're inside your head. You just left the room. And you're triggered into that fight or flight. But what happens when you say to your client, hey, tell me, how big is your budget? Or, tell me, would you like that in blue or red? Or when you start asking questions that they feel are just a little bit too probing, they also get triggered. So the reality is, in a sales encounter, that either two of the parties can get triggered. And you need to worry about, 1, am I present to notice? And 2, is my client present with me? So you remember the neuroscience of emotions. We said that anytime a stimulus from the outside world or the inside world comes in, so somebody says, as I say, we're looking at 4 other vendors, or your pricing is very expensive, or I tried your widget and it didn't work very well. That stimulates us, and every stimulus coming from the outside world can either trigger that emotional brain into one of 2 states, and it's binary. There's only 1 or 2. It can either trigger into a danger or threat state, in which case, from the moment that client says something along the lines of, I really like your competitor's offering, well, then your brain starts going down the road of perceiving a threat. And when that can happen from a salesperson, for example, you know, if we think from a client perspective, salesperson trying to move things too quickly before they've answered all the client's questions, getting into a classic sort of sales presentation, features, advantages, benefits, which is obviously designed to sell the person, closing too fast or early, being intrusive with questions, being perceived as being pushy, pitches people into a danger state, into that danger footing. So it threatens them into fight or flight. And then they basically disengage. They become closed off and they become evasive. And everything that's going on in the head then is just about, how do I get out of this situation? How do I fight or run my way out of this situation? Because the way that they feel, remember we said in week 1, the way people feel, or the way you show up determines how people feel. The way people feel determines the extent to which they engage. Once that person is triggered into that danger state, well, then that affects the feelings, emotions that they experience. It affects the decisions they make, and it affects the extent to which they're engaged or not engaged. Now, if on the other hand, you are showing up to your client in a way that triggers them into that reward state, triggers them into the same state that your best boss in the first week triggered you into routinely, perhaps by building trust, moving at a pace that they're comfortable with, talking in terms of sense of partnership, you know, reducing risk, helping them to cover their behinds, helping them solve problems, agreeing solutions, but generally whatever it takes to make them feel comfortable. Well, then you're triggering them into a reward state. And so their mindset becomes, oh, I'm going the wrong way, I beg your pardon. Their mindset becomes entirely different. Now they become engaged. They become connected, they become open. And so your job as a salesperson, our job if we're coaching salespeople, is to help them show up in a way that we always are moving people along what a lot of the neuro scientists refer to as the high road, this reward road. Because then the positive emotions affect their decisions positively, affect their decision to engage positively. So our job is always to recognize that your brain and the brain of the person working with you is wired always to minimize threats and maximize rewards. We want to move away from anything that makes us feel threatened or makes us feel comfortable. We want to move towards anything that makes us feel rewarded. So when you make a client feel threatened by pushing too quickly, by not understanding that they're not yet comfortable, by not being tuned into them and recognizing that they're sending you non-verbal signals that this is not working, well, then they'll start to pull away from you. When you engage them and you put them into that positive or reward state, they'll tend to move towards you. So the psychologists often refer to the towards mechanism as an approach mode and the away as an avoidance. So towards, away, approach, avoidance. Bottom line is you show up in one way, you can make clients want to engage. You show up another way, you can push them away. And the difference can be so small. And the difference can be simply a few well-chosen words or actions. So in sales situations, let's take something that we said earlier on and paraphrase it. This was in session 1. In sales situation, emotional intelligence is the skill of working with your emotional brain and that of your prospect. Staying present to yourself, and by present, I mean, I notice what's going on. If somebody says something that triggers me, I notice I'm being triggered, but I don't get lost in the story. I don't get hooked by it and disappear from the present, so that I'm able to remain present and be with the client. But also staying present with your prospect and noticing, is this person engaging? Are they moving towards me or are they moving away from me? So recognizing and responding to the emotional responses of your prospect. So because as you're talking to them, there's a climate where they're moving forward and back and forward and back. And some of the things make them want to approach you, and some of the things make them want to pull away from you. And without being present and not caught up inside your head, as Dan Harris said, and be present with the client and noticing what's going on with them, you cannot decide, when do I advance and when do I pull back? So using that, if you want to call it emotional data, to determine when is it time to move the client on to the next step of my sales process, and when is the time to retreat a little bit and ask questions and get them comfortable. And we're going to look at specific techniques for how you do that. So the EI in sales is using your awareness of yourself and your awareness of others to craft responses that get the best connection from your client and the best outcome as a result of the connection. Because when you connect with your client as a person, not as an object in your sales process, not as a golden goose that you can squeeze some quota out of, but as somebody who is a living, breathing human being who is responding to the things that you say as an emotional human being, then you get better results. Bottom line is, unless you're present, unless you notice what's going on, if you're lost in thought, you're lost. Presence is key. So that's why we started last week with the basic attention practice. Remember what you did with basic attention practice? You brought your attention to the breath. And then when you noticed that you had lost attention to the breath and I've lost attention, you brought the attention back to the breath. And then you notice again, I've lost attention, you brought the attention back to the breath. You're training that part of the brain so that when you walk into that sales situation, you can say, I'm going to be present with this client. I am going to notice when I've lost presence, I'm going to focus. But it's also critical that we notice when we've been triggered. If I was, and I won't do it, well, maybe I will. Let me do it. If I was to give you a little fright like that, and you give that little jump, that would be kind of the equivalent physical response that you have when somebody says to you, we've been looking at your competitors' offering. Your pricing is very high. I'm not sure that yours works as well as Joe Bloggs and so on. So you have that same emotional response. You need to be able to recognize that, recognize you're having it, and not get carried away with the thoughts that inevitably follow it, okay? Let me tell you a little bit about the science first, and then we'll talk about what the technique is for becoming more emotionally aware. Because I'm going to give you a practical technique whereby you will develop the ability to notice when you're being triggered so that you can manage your emotions effectively in those sales situations. So how do we become more emotionally self-aware? How do we become aware of emotions as they arise? Let's first define emotions with the help of our lady here. And this is a physiological definition of emotion. Bottom line is, your brain, we think of the brain as something that's sitting up in the head and solely up there, and it's got all of these, you've heard of them, neurons that connect together, and neurons that fire together, wire together, and you've heard all that stuff. And most of the neurons in your body are sitting in your brain. But there is at least another 40% of neurons spread throughout your viscera, spread throughout your entire body, down through your heart, down through your gut, down into your abdomen, and so on and so forth, which is also wired up to the brain, and which are programmed to respond to stimuli from the outside world. So when somebody gives you a fright, the reason that you feel it in your body is because those neurons are responding. So the one thing I want you to take, and this is really important for the purpose of this program, is that at the end of the day, an emotion is a physiological response to a stimulus from the outside world. And all of your emotions manifest first in the body long before the brain knows what's going on. Remember that diagram. The stimulus comes in, it goes through the emotional brain, okay? So maybe it's coming up, you've had a fright, there's a sensation in the body, it's experienced, it passes through the emotional brain. The emotional brain decides whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And then a finite amount of time later, the brain says, oh, I'm feeling fearful. Oh, I'm feeling happy. Oh, I'm feeling love. But always your emotions appear in the body first. And what's really interesting is your emotions appear reliably in the same part of the body, regardless of what your race, your race, your nationality, your age, your gender, etc. This is a piece of research done by Finnish researchers. About 700 people participated. They were Southeast Asians and Europeans. And what they did was they brought these 700 people into the lab over a period of a couple of days. And they induced about 20 or 30 different emotions into them. And the way they induced them into them is by showing them pictures, showing them videos, playing them music. So let's say, for example, if you want to get somebody either sad or angry, you might show them one of those horrific photos that one sees when you see children in a war zone. If you want to make people feel happy, you know, depending on the orientation of the person, you might show them little kids playing together or little puppies dancing around together, and they feel a certain amount of joy. But either way, they use various different stimuli to get people feeling happy, sad, angry, frustrated, depressed, and so on. And they give them two of these silhouettes. So they give a sheet of paper that has two silhouettes, and they say to them, watch this video, experience this emotion. How would you describe what you're experiencing? Oh, I'm feeling love. Tell me, whoa, I didn't mean to do that. Tell me, where is the sensation in your body increasing? Please color that into the left-hand silhouette. And where is the sensation in your body decreasing? Please color that into the right-hand silhouette. So let's say you're feeling love, then people are filling out all of these silhouettes. So imagine you got 700 people, and they're showing, here's where I sense, where I get increasing and decreasing sensations when I experience different emotions. And then they map it all together. Now, this is their summary map. They actually have a map which is much deeper that covers many, many more emotions. These are the core ones they looked at. So here's the first thing I want you to notice. Let's take love. You think of, what do we traditionally say, or where do we traditionally say we feel love? We tend to say in the heart. And you notice this is a heat map. So what you've got is where it's white, that's where the most intensity is. Most people colored that in when they were feeling love to say that's where I feel the sensations. And it goes through white, to a paler sort of beige, up to yellow, up to red, and so on and so forth. So you can see it's white hot around the heart. When you said to people, tell me where you feel the emotion, sensation in your body when you're feeling love, they said around the heart. They mentioned a few other places as well, and up in the head. Anger. Think of the last time you're angry. Where do you feel it? Your shoulders rise, your fists clench, your jaw clenches, and so on. And look what's going on. And you feel it maybe in the heart, that heartful anger. Look at here. The hands are clenching. The head, it's a very cerebral experience, and the upper body is all clenched. Look at depression. You and I, we've all had days when we feel down and depressed. What's it feel like? Most people will describe it as empty. Look at this. Not only is there nothing going on there, but all the sensations dying away. And you can look at pride, and you can look at shame, and you can look at envy. Look at the red cheeks in shame. And look at surprise. When I gave you the surprise a few moments ago, you feel it in your heart beating it up in your head. Now, here's the key thing I want to say to you. What this study showed categorically is that we all as humans feel our emotions first as sensations in the body. And secondly, we all reliably pretty much feel the same emotions in pretty much the same place, different variations. Okay. Here's another example of the wisdom of emotions, which is what Goleman talks about sometimes. It's a very famous study called the Iowa Gambling Task. And imagine you're brought into a lab, and they put down in front of you £100, $100, 100 whatever of your currency. And they say, here are 4 decks of cards, 2 red, 2 blue, and you can turn over a card, any card you like from any of the decks. And if it's, let's say there's a set of rules. Let's say if it's greater than 10, you win some more money. If it's lower than 10, you lose money. And you keep going until all the cards are gone, or until all the cards are gone, or until you've run out of money. Now, one of the other things they do in this experiment is they wire up people's palms to a sensor on a lie detector, a polygraph. And they line up the palm or wire up the palm because the sweat glands in the palm are one of the few sweat glands that don't just react to temperature, but they also react to stress. So when you're nervous, you're going for a job interview, for example, or you're meeting somebody who's going for a job interview and you get one of those wet handshakes, it's pure nervousness. So what they're doing with the lie detector is they're measuring when people are lying, they tend to be more nervous, so they tend to perspire a little bit more and sweat a little bit more in the palm. Now, one final thing I'll tell you about the study. I want you to imagine you're in the study. One final thing I want to tell you about it is that the red cards are fixed. You don't know that, but the red cards are fixed. If you pick red cards, you're going to lose more often than win. If you pick blue cards, you're going to win more often than lose. So what you would do if you had perfect intuitions, you pick the blue cards. So people start off and they try the blues and the reds. And after 50 cards, people are starting to get suspicious that there's something wrong with the red cards. After 80 cards, they know you're screwing me. These red cards are fixed. But here's the interesting thing. After 10 cards, subjects begin to sweat when they select red cards, and they begin unconsciously favoring the blue cards. There's a clear statistical swing where people start to favor the blue cards. And what the psychologists and the researchers tell us is that they're tuning into what, as I say, Goleman calls this wisdom of emotions. Every time you make a decision, your basal ganglia, the stem, the brain stem, records what was the outcome of that decision and how did I feel about it. And so there's Malcolm Gladwell, the author in Blink, called this intuition, he called intuition cognition speeded up. What's happening here is that people start to get a gut feeling. They start to get sensations in their body that says, there's just something wrong with those red cards, long before they've counted enough cards to know it's an issue. Here's the bottom line, and here's the key message. All of your emotions manifest in your body first as sensations, and then they're passed to the brain and you put a label on them. So there's anger in your body long before you know you're angry. Very frequently, if you're angered, you're often moving long before you know what's actually going on up there. The best way to become emotionally self-aware is to become aware of the sensations in the body. Now, here's a book that I was reading recently, and it's actually a fascinating, really, really well worth reading. It was about a finance guy who moved into Russia just after the wall had come down, and it's worth reading, true story. But look what he says here. He lost at one stage $900 million of his clients' money. And he said, it's hard to describe what it's like to lose 400 million. I could feel it in the sides of my stomach as if I'd been emptied out from the inside. And for weeks afterwards, my shoulder blades tingled as if I literally carried the loss on my back. Then when his marriage broke up, and this is sort of 200 pages later in the book, he said, once again, I had that empty, visceral feeling, but this time was worse because losing love was a lot harder than losing money. Think of any serious emotional experience you ever have. It manifests first as a physiological sensation. And that's long before your brain has decided what's going on. So if we are to tune in, and when we're sitting with our clients, to avoid getting lost and derailed and hijacked by our emotional brain responding to cues around us from our clients and things they might say. And if we avoid ourselves getting lost in thought, well, then the best way to do that is to develop the capacity to notice emotions coming and going in the body, because that's where they happen first. And that's the best opportunity to notice when you've been triggered. And I'll give you a few examples of that in this practice now. Now, if you're in an office right now and there's other people around you, it may be inconvenient to close your eyes. The ideal thing for this practice is that you close your eyes for the few minutes that we do it. If that's not practical, I'm going to suggest to you that you just divert your eyes down to about a meter in front of you on the ground, just with a soft focus, and follow with me on this practice. Now, sometimes because I'm not in front of you and you're not in front of me, you can say, I'll listen to it and I'll engage with it later on. I'll do it later on. Don't. If you're here now and you've got the time, take the moment to experience this, because what we're going to start is the first step in tuning in to notice emotions as they arise in the body by noticing sensations that are already there. So we're going to start this practice as we did the practice last week. And all I invite you to do right now is just allow your attention just to fall down and just become aware of your feet on the ground. And if you're sitting down, you're behind your backside on the chair. And I'm not saying visualize them. I'm saying when I go quiet for a few moments, just to become aware of any sensations that are there, just to allow your attention just to fall down and notice that you can feel out, and notice your feet, and notice, are they hot, cold, throbbing, pulsing, tingling? What sensations, if any, are there? So in your seat and your feet. So do that I'm just going to get my timer set up here. Do that just for a couple of moments. Let's take 30 seconds and just allow your attention to fall to that. And when you get distracted, as you will, that's okay. Just bring your attention back and allow it just to come down to the seat and the feet. Just allow yourself to settle into that for the next 30 seconds. I'll go quiet. Now, before we move on into the practice, I just invite you to just do a quick inventory of your body. And if you're holding yourself clenched anywhere, so your jaw is clenched, or your shoulders are high, or your fists are clenched, just soften and loosen your body and just let it go. Just let the tension fall out of it. And let's bring our attention momentarily to our feet on the ground. Just see if you can just isolate the feet and notice the sensations there. And then move the beam of your attention up to your calves and your shins. And just see, can you feel the sensations in the calves and the shin? Because there are lots of nerves there which are firing all the time. There's blood moving through. There's contact with your clothing. What do you notice What sensations do you notice around the calves and the shin? And again, if it's hot, just notice hot, cold, tight, loose. Just put a label on it, and then we're going to move on. And just scanning up. Scan up to your thighs. Notice your clothing in contact with the underneath of your thighs, which is probably in contact then with the chair. Do you feel any pulsing, any tingling, any hot, any cold? Just pay attention to any sensation. There's no right or wrong. And if you notice no sensation whatsoever, that's okay too. But just allow yourself to notice what sensations are there. You should certainly, if you're relaxing down, you should certainly be aware of your weight pushing down on the bones that you're sitting on and your pelvis pushing down against the chair. What's it feel like? Just take a moment just to experience and just notice any sensations there. I'll go quiet for a few moments. And now let's move the beam of our attention up to our abdomen, up to our gut. And the gut is lined with neurons and nerve endings. And there's a lot going on there all the time. And just see, can you sense into what sensations do you notice in your gut? Tight or loose, sharp, blunt, hot, cold, tingling. What do you notice when you just allow your attention to fall to your gut? And now let's move up to your chest, your upper body. And as you're breathing in and out, your abdomen's going up and down, your chest is expanding. Just see, can you feel any sensations there? Anything at all? Clothing in contact, hot, cold, whatever it is. Seeing as you breathe in, how do the sensations in the abdomen or the chest change, if they do? And scanning up to the shoulders and the neck. We carry a lot of our stress and a lot of our sensations in the shoulders and the neck. What are you noticing when you pay attention to the shoulders and the neck? So now for a moment, bring to mind the person that you love more than anybody else in the world. Just imagine that you're sitting in front of you and they're smiling at you. If it's a person, maybe smiling at you, reaching out to hug you, and you feel their love coming from them. If it's your pet, the dog you love, the cat you love, what is it like to be in their company? Now, just notice, where do I feel that? Where do I feel that sensation? Just notice any sensation that's arising. Notice a change. And now, turning it to a darker side. Think of somebody who has or who is a great source of difficulty for you in your life. One of the most challenging people in your life. People that just rub you the wrong way. Imagine them in front of you. Imagine them interacting with you the way they routinely do. And now, where are you feeling that in your body? Notice the sensations as they change, as your thoughts change. Don't focus too much, just allow yourself to notice what's going on. And again, just by way of noticing, bring your attention to your fingertips. Just allow the entire attention just to go to the very tips of your fingers. Can you allow your attention to go out and just notice What's going on at the tips of my fingers? Can I feel the tips of my fingers? So many nerve endings in the fingertips. What's it feel like? Notice it. Notice the upper and the lower arms. Moving up to your face, your lips. Can you feel into your lips and your nose and your cheeks? I'm not looking for a special experience, just looking for what sensations are going on there. And up onto the top of your head and your scalp. So up to now, we've looked at various body parts. Now, let's pull the lens back and let's see if we can bring attention to our entire body and just become aware of the entire body. And when you notice a sensation anywhere in the body, well then with curiosity, just allow your attention to zone in on that and say, what's it feel like? Is it tight or is it loose? Is it hot? Is it cold? And what you're doing is you're developing the ability to notice sensations in your body and to notice what's your baseline. What's normal for me? What sensations are normally going on? So just pay attention to the entire body there for a moment. And now finally, allow the attention to the body just to slip to the background. And allow the attention to your body to slip to the background. And just bring your attention back to your breath for a few moments, just following the breath in. Noticing the rib cage expanding, chest expanding, and the abdomen going up and then out, just for 3 breaths. And on the next breath, as you let it out, open your eyes. If they've been closed, you can stretch, take a deeper breath, just come back to the session. And let me first apologize for the buzz on the calendar there on the phone. So what you've just done, and this was a really greatly accelerated version of the practice that I'm going to give you a recording for. It's already up there on the Insights, on the timer, the app that I suggest. And all you're learning to do is to become aware of emotions in your body. So with this practice, what you learn is to tune in and notice what's normal, so that then when there are anomalies, you can notice that. So I'll give you a for example. If I find myself under extreme pressure where I'm starting to feel a little bit negative or fearful about things, I know reliably that it'll feel kind of like something going in through this part of my chest. It feels like a spike being driven in there and out my back. Now, it's a horrible, gruesome sort of affair, but that's the way it feels to me. Now, every time I feel that coming on, I can now say, what's that about? It's long before the brain has said, hey, you're fearful about something. Where did that come from? What's caused that? And in doing that and looking at that, then we get choices in how we're going to respond to it. And we'll talk about that an awful lot more next week. But for now, you're just trying to develop the capacity to notice sensations in the body. What I would suggest over next week, quite apart from this formal practice, is every time you get an opportunity, try and tune into the body and notice what's going on. If you go home this evening and you meet your significant other, your wife, your husband, your lover, or your kids, or somebody you care for, what does it feel like to feel the positive feelings you feel with? Where do you feel it in your body? If you get triggered and you get angry or you get fearful, or you're sitting in traffic and somebody cuts you off, where does that happen in the body? So what we're trying to do is develop the capacity to notice emotions as they arise, because when you see them arising and you start to become accustomed to them, then it becomes normal for you to be able to say, okay, what Deiric said just triggered me. Now, what am I going to do about it? Instead of reacting and get lost in your thoughts. So normally if we were face to face, I'd be saying to you, what did you notice? And we'd spend a few minutes exploring that. What I'll invite you to do as I go on to the next part is on the text in the chat, tell me for you, what was the experience of that practice like? You know, what did you notice? What was your experience of it? There's no right or wrong. I just want you, contribute anything that you care to, and we'll talk about it at the end. The key thing here is once you become accustomed to dropping into your body, it then becomes an automatic process. You notice emotions arising, and I'll show you how that really, really is helpful. So first thing, I mentioned to you at one stage neuroplasticity. The more you do this, the more you develop this part of the brain called the insula. The insula, if you like, is the muscle of attention that I referred to last week. It is that part of the brain that is responsible for you being, one, aware of yourself and your own emotions and your own body, and being able to feel in and sense into the tips of your fingers, your stomach, or whatever. But it's also, interestingly, the same part of the brain that is responsible for tuning into other people and becoming aware of other people. And that's so important. One side, you want to know, when am I triggered? But if you're sitting with a client or a prospect, you also want to be able to, if you like, almost read their mind and say, when are they be triggered? The more you do this practice, the research shows, the greater the tissue, the volume of tissue that develops in the insula, so it becomes a natural inbuilt capability. You change the structure of your brain. So that's the first thing. Now, I'll talk to you at the end of this session about how you start to take that part of the session and start to run it forward. And basically it involves practicing that body scan so that you start to become capable of just noticing every time an emotion comes along, there's a corresponding body sensation, so that over time you notice the body sensation before the emotion and you know how you react to the situations. But what about reacting to other people? In a moment, I'm going to put a piece of video up, and I'm going to ask Aoife to help me out with this. I've already experimented with this line, and it seems to be okay. This is the one, yes. And this is about 4 minutes long. And what I want to make a really important point about your physiology. I think you're going to enjoy it. But let me tell you about the video first. A couple of years ago, when the Syrian war started and refugees started flooding into Europe, a lot of people in a lot of countries had a very adverse reaction to the idea of strangers and people from a different culture coming in. And Amnesty International, the human rights people, created the video that we're going to look at to try and get people to just, instead of thinking of these as problems, but think of them as humans and think of them as people. And they called upon some research by a psychologist called Arthur Aron, who said that the single biggest thing you can do to connect with people is make eye contact. And he said specifically, you'll see in the video, the 4 minutes of eye contact connects people, more than anything else you could potentially do. So what they did was they brought a couple hundred different people over a period of days into warehouses, brought them in blindfolded, one European and one refugee. And they sat them down opposite one another blindfolded, and they took the blindfold off and they said, just look at one another for 4 minutes. No talking. You'll see some of them do talk, but just look at one another for 4 minutes. And that was the experiment, pure and simple. Now, as you watch the video of this going on, what I want you to do is not be an observer. I want you to see, can you actually put yourself into the shoes of some of the people in this video? And I'll ask you at the end what your experience was. So I need to stop the share so that I can set up the conditions for playing this. Just give me. Just one moment. I need to disengage the mechanism here a little bit. And I can then share again. So let me just ask you, and you can pop something into the chat and, just a short thing. What did you notice? So let me ask you in the chat, what did you notice when you were watching that video? So pop anything you like into the chat there, just a couple of lines. But if you're like most people, and I hope you had a decent experience with the video, hoping it wasn't too terribly slow or whatever. But what you'll have experienced is empathy. You'll have experienced that Chris just said, you can really feel the sadness of what people have been through without knowing any of their story. And then Ava is saying swelling of tears, and Joe Davenport, they opened up to one another. And did you notice, here we go, Brian, as a HR professional, this is why I'm so convinced that in-person interviews are far more effective. Eye contact and gut feeling is tops. And I'm glad that it worked well enough. And Saraswati, and apologies if my pronunciation is wrong, the initial discomfort into connected. And then Jack, warmth, friendliness, apprehension, understanding. What you just felt was empathy. And you're wired for it, and I'm wired for it. We are wired to understand how other people feel. Now, the useful definition that we're going to look at, and I wanted to share with you, is that the empathy is the experience or the ability to experience and understand what other people feel, while still maintaining a clear discernment about your own and the other person's feelings. In other words, not getting wrapped up in them. And yet, during that short video, when I run that in a live session, half the people will have red-rimmed eyes. And the other half will be choking, trying not to have red-rimmed eyes. And some of you, as you said, initial discomfort, Saraswati, and friendliness, apprehension, understanding. We feel that. And here's the key thing, and this is why it's really important when you say building awareness of others. Your brain is wired to feel what other people feel. This is some research, a lot of it done by a man called Dr. David Eagleman in the United States, but a number of others like Destiny and Lamb. And on the left-hand side, you've got a scan of a brain of somebody that's experiencing pain in what they refer to, these areas, let me get a pointer, as the pain matrix, so where pain typically manifests over here. What this is the brain of somebody watching somebody experiencing pain. And notice it's pretty much lighting up the same areas. So that expression that we often use when we say, I feel your pain, is actually closer to the biological and physiological experience of pain than we might necessarily realize. Now, watch the brain on the right, which is somebody empathizing with somebody in pain. I'm going to superimpose it on the one on the left. Watch what happens. Watch where the activation is. Same place. The only difference is the intensity. And it's not just pain. When we see other people experiencing love, hate, anger, pain, shame, in Ireland, they have an expression, and I won't use the accent. They say, I'm scarlet for you. And what they mean is, I'm embarrassed for you. When they see, when an Irish person sees somebody else being embarrassed, and they get that sense of being embarrassed for them, they say, I'm scarlet for you. And so they feel other people's emotions. That's the way you're wired. So why don't we all have that sensitivity to feel what everybody else feels? And the short answer is, we've turned it off. And we've turned it off because we're not easily able to maintain a discernment between other people's pain and our own. It's why sometimes we change the channel when we're looking at people in distress in war-torn countries or famine-torn countries. It's why we don't make eye contact with beggars in the street, even though we're essentially good, charitable people, because we don't want to feel their pain. And so we have two choices when we get an overload of empathy, which is what we all get in this highly censored, our sensory world, where we see so much of the pain in the world, is either we can burn out, and lots of health professionals, social workers, charity workers, and people who work in really difficult situations, they burn out with empathy fatigue, or we can stop caring, we can switch it off. And most of us bring it down unconsciously as a survival mechanism. We close off our empathy, we become colder intentionally. Now, we can turn it back on anytime. You saw that with the video. You can make that choice to say, I'm sitting in front of somebody and I want to feel into what they're feeling, but we need to do it on purpose. We need to do it with intention. I'll talk more about intention next time. What I mean is that when we sit down with somebody, we need to be saying that I want to tune in and feel, what is this person feeling? If you've got somebody sitting opposite you and you go about your carefully crafted sales presentation and it gets them triggered, you want to know. So as you're walking in there with the intention of being open. Now, here are the blindingly obvious clues that something's going on with somebody. They're the verbal and non-verbal sort of clues. And this is not what I want to focus on, but there are lots of clues. So if the tone goes from friendly to distance, or if the body language goes from being perfectly open to suddenly being closed when you say something, or if you feel the temperature drop. And you know what I mean in a conversation when you feel the temperature drop a couple of degrees. You suddenly realize, what just happened? A few moments ago, everything was going great. Now, it's either just gone very, very cool, or it may actually go very, very warm. You suddenly notice something I've said has turned up the positive thing. Maybe the affinity disappears or goes, from us to you, or from you to us even, or from you to we, and so on. But here are the obvious sort of things you could be watching for. But you're actually wired to pick up on much subtler things. And you can pick up on the sorts of flight behaviors and the fight behaviors. So, for example, these again are the blindingly obvious, sorry. So flight behaviors, somebody evading your questions, watching the clock, not really sure, send me a proposal, get back to me later on. These are all get me out of here behaviors. And those clues are there if we're listening to them. Same with the fight behaviors. People can become snappy. They can become slightly rude, become impatient with you, become disengaged. Those are sort of outward manifestations. But here's what what you can learn to tune into from what we're teaching on this program. You can learn to tune into what people are actually feeling as they feel it. And that is a technique called use of self. Some therapists use it, Gestalt coaches use it. And what it's saying is use of self is intentionally saying, as I go to sit down with Deiric, I'm going to allow myself to be open to feel what he's feeling. I'm going to allow myself to notice what's going on with him, because I know that subtly my brain is trying to get into resonance with his brain, and I am capable of feeling what he's feeling if I can only take the time to notice it. So that's what we'll talk about as use of self. So first thing is one of intention. As you're walking into the room, I intend to be open to this person. It's setting the intention. It's telling your brain, I want to know what's going on. And then it's noticing. So what am I noticing? When I'm sitting with this person, as I'm talking to them, if something suddenly changes, I notice it. What do I notice in my own body? What do I notice? Do I notice a sudden shift? I feel a tightening up. I feel a loosening. I feel a warmth. I feel something change. Those intuitions and those gut feelings, those are the sensations in your body communicating through the emotional brain, which has no connection to the speech center of your brain. So all it can give you is gut senses and feelings. And sometimes it's useful data, and frankly, sometimes it's not. So what you need to do is validate it. So you're making your presentation, you're talking to somebody, and suddenly you get this sense, why am I suddenly feeling a little bit frightened? Why am I suddenly feeling a little bit threatened? Why am I suddenly feeling a little bit, impatient? It may be coming from the person you're talking to. It's just to remain open and then to validate. Hey, when you said what you just said, I got a sense that this is something really important to you. Am I right? I felt that this was something important. Or when I said what I just said, I got a feeling that somehow I was on the wrong track. Where should I focus? And a lot of it is just about remaining open to notice what's going on with yourself and accepting that it may be a reflection of what's going on with the other person. Now you think of that. If your brains are continually, as the research says, trying to sync, trying to get into resonance, well then when they are sensing and feeling something, you have the potential to tune into that. And man, is that useful data to be able to navigate that conversation in a more sensitive manner with your client, so that you can advance your case when you see it, you sense that the client is opening, is softening, is feeling positive and rewarded by the conversation, and you can back off and ask the appropriate questions when you feel that you're threatening them or you're closing things down. So what we do on this program is not about doing, because you already know how to do what it takes to be a salesperson. You already have the skills, you have the sales training, you know your products. It's about your state of being, your way of being when you show up. So if you were to walk into each of your sales meetings and first off, determine that one, I'm going to show up and I'm going to make eye contact and I'm going to be there with that person genuinely, not trapped inside my head. and I'm going to open myself to feel what they feel. And that's the capacity we're trying to develop. And the only thing that develops that is practice and practice and practice. Now, if you're 30 years of age, it's taken you 30 years to learn how to be as you are right now. If you've been selling for 10, it's taken you 10 years to learn how you sell right now. It's going to take a little bit of practice to get into this different way of being and to show up in a different way. And the practices that I'm going to give you and the practice I gave you last week starts that process. The body scan is your mechanism for starting to notice, one, how you're emotionally reacting to things, but two, to be able to tune in to the way the person across the table is responding to things. So when we get to the so-called homework section, I'm going to be saying, please do the body scan. I'll talk to you about that. But I want to do one final exercise with you for which you're going to need your pen and paper. One of the most important things that you can do if you want to become more mindfully and emotionally intelligent in the way you show up as a salesperson or as a person. If you're not a salesperson, it doesn't matter. This is about being a human and being human with other humans and establishing the sort of contact you felt with a video, for God's sakes. Well, then you need to know yourself better. So we're going to do another little bit of journaling. I'm just going to give you 60 seconds on each of these. You remember the rules last week. This is about really tuning into in what situations am I more emotionally self-aware, in what situations am I challenged in terms of emotional self-awareness. And you remember what I said last week. Grab your pen and paper, do that now. And as I put up a prompt, here's the first one. I get triggered, or I get triggered or set off or get caught inside my own head in sales situations when? And when I say go, I'm going to give you 60 seconds, and you write down the prompt now, and then you just keep writing and just allow it to flow out of you. No thinking about it, no structuring, no grammar, no spelling, no need to get it perfectly punctuated. Just let the pen keep moving for the 60 seconds. And if you run out of something to say, you can write down the prompt again and see, does that restart you? I get triggered in sales situations when. So let me give you 60, or maybe I'll give you 75 seconds on each of these four. And this is a way of diving deeply into knowing yourself a little bit better, because being aware of the need for self-awareness is already being more self-aware. So each of these exercises you do gives you a greater insight into how you show up and how you can show up more positively. So please, let's start with this prompt. Write it down. And when you've written it down, just keep writing for the next 60 or 70 seconds. So I'm starting that right now. So go. Remember, if you run out of something to write the prompt down again and just let it flow. Or you can start writing, I have nothing left to write, I have nothing left to write, until it comes along. Keep the pen moving. Okay, and the second prompt, the easiest way to distract me in a sales situation is write down the prompt and just keep writing. What are the easiest ways you get distracted in a sales situation? Not trying to fix it, just trying to become aware of it. Just keep your pen moving. And the third prompt, I can give a prospect my full attention when? If you're not a salesperson, I can give my conversational partner my full attention when? And just keep writing. And your final prompt. The best way for me to prepare to be present is. The best way for me to prepare to be present is. Keep the pen moving. Okay, so let's finish up with that. And what I'm going to suggest, in the interest of keeping on time, I won't do it now. I'm going to suggest when we finish this session at some stage, open up that and just read it again. Read through what you wrote, absorb it, and put it away. And I'm going to suggest that you come back to these prompts between now and the next session, and we have plenty of time to do that, and that you go through them again, and then look at what you wrote the first time and the second time. And this is a process of becoming more aware. And here's the wonderful thing about awareness. The more aware you are of the need for awareness, the more aware you are. Sounds awfully philosophical, but you cannot be, you are always more self-aware after you realize how important it is to be self-aware. It's just simple. So the more of these exercises you do, the more self-aware you become, and the more you will show up in a different manner completely. So let us see where we are right now. We are in really nice time to come to the homework section, and I want to take some comments from you in a moment. First thing I wanted to mention to you is, like I said last week, that if you download the Insights timer from iPhone, the iStore, or the App Store, I should say, or the Android, I think it's Game Store and Android, and you download that, it doesn't cost you a cent, and search for either Genos or Deiric, and you'll find that the practice that we put up there last week, the basic attention practice is there. And you'll also find, if you look through that the body scan practice is there. And I'll tell you what you do with that in a while. But you can download that, you can get it free, and you get it on the telephone so that you're able to use it whenever you get a convenient time. And I think this is now an appropriate time to say to you, if you see a value in these practices, if you see a value in the potential and the capacity that you're building, well, now is the time to become intentional about it and say, when is the best time to schedule this into my busy schedule so that I get it done? Is it first thing in the morning that I give it 10 minutes? Is it last thing at night? Is it lunchtime? When will it actually work? Because if you don't formally schedule it, it's not going to happen. You're not going to remember, and other things are going to compete. So here's what I'm asking you to try for next week. Because as I said, this is essentially a practical program. If you haven't already, well, dive into your report. You know what? even if you have already, it wouldn't do any harm to dive in, just see, again, what are people saying? This is improving your self-awareness already. And what are the things I need to be aware of that need to change in the way I show up? I would suggest that you take these new awareness of others prompts from this week's session, and that you do one of those every day or every second day over the next while. And then finally, that you do the basic attention and the body scan practice. And I would alternate them. If you're going to make a commitment to do them both, well, then do the body scan one day and the basic attention practice next day. And besides anything else, very, very calming stuff. Quite apart from the benefits that we're using these practices to develop, it's a very great way of relaxing. So I've already said journal with the new prompts, and I noticed I have that in twice, and I forgot to take it out after I realized this morning. So where we are is we've just covered the awareness of others side of things. And you have those practices. You now have the tools in your hand to start developing a new way of being, a new way of showing up to your client and to the people that you talk with. Next time, we're going to take exactly the same tool, that body scan, and I'm going to show you how you use it to reduce your stress, how you use it to reduce your reaction, your reactivity in stressful situations and emotionally charged situations. And that session is on May the 21st. So you've plenty of time to get that practice in. But it's honestly, ask yourself, do I want to spectate on the program and just enjoy the bit of knowledge? And you're very welcome to do that. Or do I really want to get something out of this? And if you do, please consider the practices. So with that said, let me introduce the lady who does all the work behind this program back onto the screen. And I'm going to disappear for bandwidth reasons and ask Aoife to come in. And just if there were any comments from earlier on, any questions, etc., I'm just going to kill my video so that we maintain a good, stable connection.
Sure.
So anything there?
Yeah, thanks, Deiric. Folks, if you do have any questions, feel free to chat them in now as we're going over a few comments, because we don't have any at the moment. We did have another comment added in after that piece, Deiric, saying that experiencing and sharing feelings in person is touching, effective, and real. This session is insightful and very real when shared in person.
Oh, thank you.
And then just another warmth, friendliness, apprehension, and understanding. But yeah, we don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay. Well, then, thank you, Aoife. Do you want to talk about the group, and then we'll do just a close off?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just as I mentioned at the start of the session, if you haven't already joined our LinkedIn group, we'll be posting a link out with the follow-up email that we invite you to come in and collaborate, find some of the latest research, news, articles, industry trends on these topics. And also, it's just a good place to kind of share your experiences, hear from others. You know, sometimes committing to doing these new practices can be a change. So it's really good to kind of have this group. Some of us like to call each other accountability buddies, where we can reach out and ask each other for input and advice. So it's just, great place. So we invite you to join. And I think we've over 15 members at the moment. Yep. So it grew very quickly. So I'll share that link out in the post email.
Thank you, Aoife. And we're starting to see more content coming on about the application of mindfulness and emotional intelligence as more research comes out. It's starting to find its way into the forum, and some really great thinkers in there, and great interaction and great content. It's a great place just to stay up on this stuff. So with that all said, that brings us right to the end. And unless there are any other questions there, I'm going to flick back up and I'm going to say, I'll see you on May the 21st. And I know I sound like a school teacher, and I know I sound like I'm trying to bully you into it, but please think about it. If you really want to get the most out of this, there's a good stretch between now and the 21st. You get the practices done. I challenge you to get the practices done, and you just notice how these faculties start to develop. And the best practice you can get is in person with people. Somebody made that comment there. So here are a couple of things I suggest to you just before we close off. One is, as you go about your business over the next several days and the next couple of weeks, anytime you find yourself feeling triggered, whether it's positively or negatively, you're feeling joy, you're feeling love, you're feeling anger, you're feeling sadness, see if you can have the presence of mind just to tune into your body and notice where that's happening. That'll start to develop that. And then as you are having meetings, don't wait until you've got this perfect. As you're walking into a meeting, you're sitting down, nobody needs to know. You can say, I am setting the intention to bring my full attention to this person. I'm going to open up, I'm going to feel what they're feeling, and start getting into this use of self. Start noticing when other people's emotions are communicated into you, and notice just how valuable that data is. But with that said, thank you very much. Thank you for your time again. And we will get the recording out to you. And we'll see you again on May 21st for the last session, which is going to be on the topic du jour in the world, and that is resilience and stress management. Until then, you have a fantastic time. Take care of yourself.
Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Cheers.